I never imagined that 4 years of perfect grades, student council presidency, and countless sleepless nights studying could be overshadowed by a nail appointment. The morning of my high school graduation as valedictorian, I was bubbling with excitement about delivering my speech to a packed auditorium. I had spent months perfecting every word, every pause, every gesture. My parents had promised to be there front row center, beaming with pride, as their eldest daughter achieved what I thought was the pinnacle of academic success. But as I stood in our kitchen that morning dressed in my cap and gown, I learned that my sister Madison's pedicure appointment had been moved to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the exact same time as my valedictorian speech. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from, and please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Because what I discovered that day was just the beginning of unraveling 22 years of carefully hidden secrets that would change my life forever. Growing up as the eldest daughter in a middle-class family in Ohio, I always knew something felt different about how my parents treated Madison and me. I am Emma, 22 years old, and my sister Madison is 20. Our father David works as an accountant, and our mother Jennifer is a part-time nurse. From as early as I can remember, Madison seemed to float through life on a cloud of parental approval and financial support that never quite extended to me. When we were kids, Madison's birthday parties were elaborate affairs with hired entertainers, custom cakes, and guest lists that included half her grade. My birthdays were typically family dinners at home with a store-bought cake. Madison's closet overflowed with name-brand clothes and the latest trends, while I learned to shop clearance racks and appreciate hand-me-downs from cousins. When Madison and I fought, which happened frequently, our parents invariably took her side, explaining that I was older and should know better, that I needed to be more understanding of Madison's sensitive nature. Instead of becoming bitter, I threw myself into academics. I reasoned that if I could not earn my parents' love through simply existing, like Madison seemed to do, I would earn their respect through achievement. I maintained a perfect 4.0 grade point average throughout high school, served as student council president for 3 years, volunteered at the local animal shelter every weekend, and tutored underclassmen in mathematics and science. I genuinely believed that these accomplishments would finally make my parents see me the way they saw Madison. The months leading up to graduation were filled with intense preparation. I had been selected as valedictorian, an honor that represented 4 years of relentless dedication to my studies. I spent countless hours crafting my speech, which I had titled "Breaking Cycles." The irony of that theme would not become clear to me until much later. I practiced my delivery until every word felt natural, even recording myself on video to perfect my timing and gestures. I had specifically asked my parents to reserve June 15th graduation day weeks in advance. They assured me they would be there, and I even made dinner reservations at our favorite family restaurant to celebrate afterward. I used money from my part-time job at the campus bookstore to buy a beautiful navy dress for the occasion. While Madison received a generous monthly allowance, I had been working since I turned 16, splitting my time between school extracurriculars and my job. I told myself that the independence was character building, that my parents were teaching me valuable lessons about self-reliance. The night before graduation, I reminded my parents about the ceremony timing. The doors opened at 1:30 in the afternoon, and the ceremony began promptly at 2 o'clock. My speech was scheduled for 2:15. Madison mentioned casually during dinner that she had a nail appointment, but I was too excited about the next day to pay attention. My parents seemed distracted during our meal, but I attributed their preoccupation to nervous excitement about my big day. That evening, I carefully laid out my graduation outfit, practiced my speech one final time in front of my bedroom mirror, and called my best friend Ashley to share my excitement about the next morning. I fell asleep feeling more hopeful and proud than I had in years. The morning of graduation dawned bright and clear. I woke up early, spending extra time on my hair and makeup because I knew there would be photographs. I wanted to look perfect for what I believed would be one of the most important days of my young life. As a graduating senior, I needed to arrive at the school by noon for final preparation and to line up with my classmates. At 11 o'clock, I came downstairs in my navy dress cap and gown draped over my arm and asked my parents what time they planned to leave for the ceremony. I wanted to make sure they would arrive by 1:30 to get good seats. That was when my world began to tilt off its axis. "Oh, honey, we might be a little late," my mother Jennifer said without looking up from her coffee. "Madison's nail appointment got moved to 2 o'clock. I stared at her, certain I had misheard. "But Mom, my speech is at 2:15. If you are late, you will miss it entirely." "Do not worry, sweetheart," my father David chimed in from behind his newspaper. "These things always run over schedule anyway. We will catch the end of your speech." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Dad, this is my valedictorian speech. I have been working on it for months. You promised you would be there." Madison appeared in the kitchen doorway, examining her current nail polish with dissatisfaction. "My nails look absolutely terrible, and my summer internship starts on Monday. I cannot show up to a professional office with chipped polish." I turned to my parents, waiting for them to explain that my graduation took priority, that Madison could reschedule her appointment for literally any other time. Instead, my mother patted my shoulder in what she probably thought was a comforting gesture. "Emma, you know you are our responsible daughter. You will be fine up there. Madison really needs this appointment." 4 years of straight A grades. 4 years of perfect attendance. 4 years of student council leadership. 4 years of working part-time while maintaining academic excellence. And my parents were choosing to miss my valedictorian speech because Madison needed a pedicure. I drove to school that morning in a daze, barely holding back tears as I parked and walked toward the building where other graduating seniors were gathering with their families. The sight of parents proudly taking photos, grandparents clutching flowers, and siblings wearing t-shirts with graduates' names printed on them made my chest tighten with a pain I had never experienced before. Inside the auditorium, I found the section of seats I had reserved for my family. 3 empty chairs in the front row that should have been filled with the people who mattered most to me. My classmates' families were already claiming their spots, chatting excitedly about their children's achievements and future plans. Mrs. Rodriguez, my AP English teacher and the faculty advisor who had helped me prepare my speech, noticed my distress during our final rehearsal. She pulled me aside in the hallway behind the stage. "Emma, you look upset. Are you nervous about your speech?" I could not bring myself to tell her the truth. How could I explain that my parents valued my sister's nail polish more than my academic achievements? Instead, I mumbled something about pre-speech jitters and tried to focus on the ceremony ahead. As we lined up alphabetically for the processional, I watched through the auditorium windows as more and more families filled the seats. Ashley's family had arrived early and saved seats near the front. Ashley's mother caught my eye and waved enthusiastically, mouthing, "We are so proud of you." The kindness in her gesture nearly broke my composure entirely. The ceremony began exactly on time. I sat on the stage with my fellow graduates, looking out at an audience filled with proud families. My reserved seats remained empty. When my name was called for special recognition as valedictorian, I heard Ashley's family cheering loudly from their section, trying to fill the silence where my parents' voices should have been. When it was time for my speech, I approached the podium with my hands trembling slightly. I looked out at the audience one more time, hoping against hope that my parents had arrived and were seated somewhere in the back. They were nowhere to be seen. I delivered my speech about breaking cycles, about choosing to forge new paths, instead of repeating the patterns of previous generations. My voice cracked slightly during the section about family expectations and the courage it takes to demand better treatment. The audience responded with enthusiasm, giving me a standing ovation that lasted nearly a minute. Ashley's mother was crying, and several teachers were nodding in appreciation. But my parents missed it all. They finally appeared during the last 10 minutes of the ceremony, slipping in through the back doors as the principal was announcing final remarks. Madison strutted beside them, her feet adorned with a fresh French pedicure, completely oblivious to the magnitude of what they had missed. After the ceremony ended and families gathered on the lawn for photos, My parents approached with bright smiles as if nothing unusual had happened. "How did it go, sweetheart?" my mother asked, apparently unaware of the absurdity of her question. "You missed my speech," I said quietly. "The one I have been preparing for months. The most important moment of my high school career." Madison, who had been admiring her reflection in her phone camera, looked up with excitement. "But look how amazing my nails turned out. The technician was so detail-oriented. Each toe is like a tiny work of art." My father glanced at his watch impatiently. "Well, we are here now. Should we head to dinner? I made reservations for 5 o'clock. "There will be other speeches, honey," my mother added dismissively. "You are going to college in the fall. Lots of opportunities to speak publicly." I excused myself to the restroom and locked myself in a stall, finally allowing the tears I had been holding back to fall. When I emerged, Ashley was waiting for me with a concerned expression. "My mom recorded your entire speech on her phone," she said gently. "She thought you might want to have it." At dinner, the conversation revolved entirely around Madison's internship and her preparation routine. My parents took photos of her feet to post on social media, commenting on how professional and polished she looked. When I tried to share highlights from my speech, I was interrupted repeatedly by Madison's stories about the nail salon and my father's complaints about the cost of graduation ceremonies. The waiter, a kind older man who had been serving our family for years, congratulated me on my graduation and asked about my valedictorian speech. My parents seemed surprised that he knew about my academic achievement, as if they had forgotten to mention it during their conversations with him. That night back at home, I finally confronted my parents in our living room. I had reached my breaking point. "Do you realize what today meant to me?" I asked, standing in front of the couch where they were watching television. "I was valedictorian. I earned the highest grades in my entire graduating class for 4 consecutive years." My mother sighed and muted the TV. "Emma, we are proud of you, but you are being overly dramatic about this." "Madison needed that appointment," my father added. "Her summer internship starts on Monday, and first impressions matter." "My internship at the law firm starts on Monday, too," I replied, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "But somehow my needs did not factor into your decision-making." From upstairs, Madison called down, "Emma is just jealous because everyone at the salon complimented my pedicure choice." My father's response was the final straw. "Emma, you are the responsible one in this family. Madison needs more guidance and support. You have always been able to take care of yourself." "You will have other achievements," my mother added. This was just high school. Just high school. 4 years of my life dedicated to academic excellence reduced to just high school because it was inconvenient for them to prioritize my accomplishments. That night I sat in my bedroom staring at the ceiling, replaying not just the events of graduation day but 22 years of similar moments. The pattern was so clear now that I wondered how I had missed it for so long. Madison's needs always came first. Madison's emotions were always prioritized. Madison's convenience always trumped my achievements. But as I reflected deeper, I began to remember strange conversations, financial discrepancies, and academic records that had never quite made sense. There were whispered phone calls that stopped when I entered rooms, bank statements that my parents quickly shuffled away when I was nearby, and medical appointments for Madison that seemed unusually frequent and specialized. I texted Ashley asking if she could talk. We had been best friends since middle school, and her family had often provided me with the emotional support I craved at home. When she called back, I found myself asking a question that had been nagging at the back of my mind for years. "Ashley, do you remember anything strange about when I was younger? Like, do your parents ever mention anything about my family that seemed odd?" There was a long pause before Ashley answered. "Emma, my mom worked at the adoption agency downtown for 15 years before she became a teacher. She has always felt terrible about something involving your family, but she made me promise never to say anything because it was not her secret to tell." My stomach dropped. "What kind of secret?" "I think you need to have a conversation with your parents about your birth records," Ashley said carefully. And Emma, if what I think is true, you should also look into your family's financial arrangements. Some things about how your parents treat you and Madison might make more sense. The next day, while my parents were at work and Madison was at her internship orientation, I accessed our family computer using the password I had watched my father type countless times. What I found in the financial records made me physically sick. Bank statements showed that Madison's credit card bills were paid in full every month by our parents, while I had been required to work part-time since I turned 16. College fund documents revealed that money specifically saved for my education had been repeatedly transferred to cover Madison's shopping sprees, spring break trips, and various other expenses that our parents categorized as Madison's developmental needs. But the most damaging discovery was a series of email exchanges between my parents discussing waiting until Emma is older to explain the adoption situation, and making sure Emma never finds out about the trust fund specifications. I found my birth certificate buried in a file folder marked Emma Legal Documents. It clearly stated that I had been adopted at 6 months old. 22 years of my life, and I had never known I was adopted. The trust fund documents were even more revealing. My paternal grandparents, who had died when I was in elementary school, had established a fund specifically for their biological grandchild upon their death. Madison received $500 monthly from this trust money that my parents had explained to her as a responsibility allowance for being mature and helpful around the house. But perhaps the most infuriating discovery was a series of documents related to Madison's SAT preparation. My parents had hired a private tutor for her, but the invoices were submitted under my Social Security number and listed as academic support for Emma. Madison had received extensive test prep services while I studied for my SATs using library books and free online resources. I also found medical records showing that Madison had been receiving therapy for anxiety and social adjustment issues for 3 years. When I had approached my parents about feeling overwhelmed and stressed during my junior year, they told me that therapy was expensive and that I should try harder to manage my emotions on my own. That evening, I called a family meeting. I have something important to discuss with everyone about our family dynamics, I announced as my parents and Madison gathered in the living room. My parents exchanged glances, probably expecting me to apologize for my dramatic behavior after graduation. Madison continued scrolling through her phone, half listening while admiring photos of her manicure. Before I start, I want Madison to tell everyone how she really feels about the way our parents treat us differently, I said, setting up my laptop on the coffee table. Madison shrugged without looking up. What are you talking about? Mom and Dad love us both equally. You just take everything too seriously. That is interesting, I replied, opening the first folder of evidence I had compiled, because I have 22 years of documentation that suggests otherwise. I started with the financial records displaying Madison's credit card statements alongside my employment records from the campus bookstore. The contrast was stark and undeniable. Let me show you Madison's monthly credit card bills versus my work schedule to pay for my own expenses, I said, projecting the documents onto our TV screen. My parents' faces had gone pale, but I was just getting started. Here are the bank transfers showing where my college fund went to pay for Madison's spring break trip to Cancun last year. I continued clicking to the next document. And here are the invoices for Madison's SAT tutor, which were somehow submitted using my Social Security number. I said, watching my parents realize that their carefully hidden financial maneuvering was completely exposed. Here are Madison's therapy session receipts dated over the past 3 years, during which time I was told that therapy was too expensive when I asked for help with anxiety. I added, letting that information sink in. Madison had finally stopped looking at her phone and was staring at the screen with growing confusion and alarm. But the most interesting discovery, I said, saving the biggest revelation for last, is my adoption paperwork that you have been hiding from me for 22 years. The room went completely silent. What adoption? Madison whispered, looking genuinely confused. Emma, what are you talking about? Apparently, Madison, "I am not your real sister, after all," I replied, displaying my birth certificate. "I was adopted when I was 6 months old, something our parents decided I did not need to know." I then pulled up the trust fund documents. And here is the proof that Madison receives $500 monthly from a trust fund established by our grandparents, specifically for their biological grandchild only. Madison's face crumbled as she began to understand that her comfortable lifestyle had been built on my exclusion from family resources and honesty. "Emma, I did not know," she stammered, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I thought you were just naturally better at everything. I thought you preferred working and being independent. While you were getting manicures and pedicures paid for by the family, I was working double shifts to afford my graduation dress," I said, my voice steady but firm. "While you were getting professional therapy for your anxiety, I was told to manage my emotions better. While you were getting SAT tutoring, I was studying with library books." Madison suddenly stood up and ran outside to our backyard, collapsing onto the porch steps in tears. Just as I had expected, my parents immediately rushed after her, their instinct to comfort Madison overriding any concern for how I might be feeling after learning I had been lied to my entire life. I called out after them, "Even now, when I am the one who has been deceived for 22 years, you comfort her first." Through our living room window, I watched my parents sit on either side of Madison on the porch, rubbing her back and speaking to her in gentle tones. After 22 years of being the responsible one, the independent one, the one who could take care of herself, I was still not the one they thought to comfort first. I packed a small overnight bag and left a note on the kitchen counter. "I am staying at Ashley's house tonight. When you are ready to have an honest conversation about 22 years of lies and financial manipulation, you know where to find me." I spent 3 days at Ashley's house gaining perspective and processing the magnitude of what I had discovered. Ashley's parents, who had always treated me with more consideration than my own family, provided the emotional support I needed to think clearly about my situation. My parents called repeatedly, alternating between apologies and defensive justifications for their behavior. They claimed they had planned to tell me about the adoption when I was older and could handle it better. They insisted that the financial arrangements were complicated and that they had always intended to make things fair eventually. Madison, however, surprised me with a series of heartfelt text messages. She wrote that she had been thinking constantly about our conversation and was beginning to understand how differently we had been treated our entire lives. She apologized sincerely for not recognizing the disparities and for taking her privileges for granted. During my time away, I researched adoption disclosure laws and discovered that my parents had been legally required to inform me of my adoption status when I turned 18. Their failure to do so was not just morally questionable, but potentially legally problematic. I also consulted with a financial advisor that Ashley's father recommended to understand my rights regarding the family finances and the misuse of my college fund. After 3 days, I returned home with a list of conditions for rebuilding our family relationships. I required complete financial transparency, family therapy sessions with a professional counselor, equal treatment going forward, and restitution for the college funds that had been diverted to Madison's expenses. To my surprise, my parents agreed to all of my conditions without argument. I think they finally understood how close they had come to losing me entirely. Our first family therapy session was uncomfortable but necessary. Dr. Sarah Chen, our counselor, helped my parents understand that their misguided belief that Madison needed more help, while I was naturally responsible, had created a harmful dynamic that prioritized one child's immediate comfort over the other child's basic emotional needs. Madison voluntarily offered to return the money she had received from the trust fund to help pay for my college expenses. While I appreciated the gesture, I told her that the money itself was not the issue. The real problem had been the secrecy and the unequal treatment that the financial arrangements represented. Over the following months, my parents made genuine efforts to rebuild our relationship. They attended my law internship recognition ceremony, celebrated my academic achievements properly, and began treating Madison and me with equal consideration. Madison also changed her behavior significantly. She got a part-time job, stopped expecting our parents to prioritize her convenience over important family events, and began contributing to household expenses. Most importantly, she stopped taking our parents' attention and resources for granted. The healing process was not perfect, and there were setbacks along the way. But for the first time in my life, we were having honest conversations about family dynamics, instead of pretending that everything was fine while resentments festered beneath the surface. I established clear boundaries with my family while maintaining my love for them. I made it clear that I would not sacrifice my self-worth for their comfort, and that any future relationship would need to be based on mutual respect and honesty. My law internship turned into a full-time opportunity after graduation, and I discovered that my professional relationships were much healthier when I was not constantly seeking validation from people who had never learned to appreciate my worth. My friendship with Ashley deepened as I learned to value people who had recognized my worth from the beginning, rather than spending energy trying to earn recognition from those who took me for granted. I also began volunteering with adoption advocacy groups, helping other adoptees navigate the complex emotions that come with discovering hidden family secrets. Most surprisingly, my relationship with Madison improved dramatically once we began interacting as equals, rather than as competitors for our parents' attention. We developed a genuine sisterly bond based on mutual respect and understanding. Through therapy, I learned that being adopted did not make me less valuable or less deserving of love and consideration. I came to understand that my parents' behavior reflected their own emotional limitations rather than any deficiency in me. Looking back on that graduation day, I realized that my valedictorian speech about breaking cycles was more prophetic than I could have imagined. By refusing to accept unequal treatment and demanding honesty from my family, I broke a cycle of dysfunction that might have continued indefinitely. I learned that sometimes exposing painful truths causes temporary chaos, but ultimately leads to more authentic and sustainable relationships. I discovered that people will treat you exactly how you allow them to treat you, and that self-advocacy is not selfishness, but essential self-respect. Family love should be unconditional, but it should not come at the cost of one person's dignity or emotional well-being. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to refuse to participate in unhealthy patterns, even when that refusal causes discomfort. I cannot change the 22 years of unequal treatment, but I can choose how my future unfolds. I am no longer angry with my parents or Madison. Instead, I am grateful for the clarity that painful day provided, and for the authentic relationships that emerged from the ashes of our family's dysfunction. That nail appointment taught me something invaluable about priorities and self-worth. When people show you their priorities through their actions, believe them. But more importantly, when you finally understand your own worth, you do not need anyone's permission to claim it. My valedictorian speech about breaking cycles turned out to be my own playbook for emotional freedom. Sometimes the most profound family transformations begin with one person having the courage to say, "This is not acceptable," and meaning it. What do you think about family dynamics like this? Have you ever experienced favoritism in your own family, or have you had to confront difficult truths about people you love? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and do not forget to like this video if Emma's story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories about family struggles and personal growth, and share this video with someone who might need to hear about the power of standing up for yourself. Thank you for listening to Emma's journey, and remember that your worth is not determined by how others choose to treat you. May you find the courage to demand the respect and honesty you deserve in all your relationships.